we're going to be putting this on the internet, and I just want everybody to be mindful of that, because the majority of our time together will be me hearing from you, not necessarily direct talking at you. There'll be some information that I can share. I think that that's really important, but I also think it's really important for your voice to come through in the budget process, and that's really what this is for. I should also say that we do have some translation services if you need help with American Sign Language, or if you need help with Spanish translation. We have that as an option, and you just need to let us know, and we'll make sure that you have that accommodation. Okay, so here's the part where I need your help. If you could let us know who you are, and that you're coming to hang out. No, you're just in time. Perfect timing. Hey, good to see you. And if you have a smartphone and you don't mind sharing a little bit of information with us, this is pretty important. We are trying to collect information from a broad range of our community. It's not a mistake that we are at fabulous James Hubert Blake High School today, because this is an area of the county that doesn't always get a lot of attention and doesn't always get a lot of love, and we want to make sure that the voices in every corner of the county are heard and amplified. And so it is important that you tell us a little bit about who you are and your representation in some of the comments, because this is a part of the process. So if you just take a second, I'm going to pause, I'm going to stop talking, and give you an opportunity to give us a little bit of feedback about who you are and just share some basic information. Even if you don't live in Montgomery County, that's still helpful to us, because you may be connected to Montgomery County in other ways, like you're a part of the team MCPS and you're a part of our workforce. That's great too. We still want to know that information. It's super helpful for us. In addition to MCPS TV recording our session for today, we are also taking some notes. And this is Chris Cram. He's from our communications office, and you have a handful of team members on my team that are sprinkled throughout the audience today that are taking some notes as to some of the things that are happening in the conversation, and we are trying to incorporate a lot of your ideas into our budget proposal that ends up going before the Board of Education at the end of December. Speaking of the Board of Education, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce a member of the Board of Education who's here right now, and this is Brenda Wolf. Hi, Brenda Wolf. This was in close proximity to your house. I'm delighted that you could make it tonight. And we're also delighted to have a member of the Board of Education elect. So this is Natalie Zimmerman. You want to say hi? So the Board of Education has some really critical roles that they perform. They perform a policy function guiding the school system's rules and regulations. They adopt a budget, they hire and fire a superintendent, and they provide oversight to the school district. These are all really integrated into tonight's conversation. So really glad that you all are here this evening, and thank you for making time to be a part of the conversation, because just like we're listening, they're listening as well, because it will inform their decisions about the things that go into the final version of the budget. Before we begin, I want to take a pause, and I want to acknowledge some really troubling things that are going on outside of Montgomery County. And I want to put some things out up front. There was a national election last week, and the selected candidate, who is now the president-elect of the United States, has already made some pretty bold proclamations about what will and won't happen with education in his administration. And I got to tell you, it's troubling. Making bold proclamations about dissolving the Department of Education, whether that happens or not, making proclamations about policy items, it's all very concerning. We take it all very seriously. We are paying very close attention to the rhetoric. Our students and the adults that work in our school system are very hurt by some of the statements that are being made. And it's not doing a lot to build the type of community that we value in Montgomery County, and that is really harmful. Just know that as we take steps moving forward to make the school system the best that it can be and to make Montgomery County a great place to live, work, and learn, that these are things that we're taking in stride. And these are things that we are planning for and that we are focused on and concerned about. I will tell you that very specifically, I'm concerned about our kids and their well-being and making sure that they feel supported when they hear hurtful things or they see hurtful engagements coming from national leaders. It's really troubling, and we need to create an environment where our kids and our staff members feel supported. It's very hurtful when we've got dedicated staff who are committed to meeting the needs of our students with disabilities, hearing about their funding streams being potentially interrupted. This is all part of this big conversation, and it's something that we are definitely attentive to. I will say that I feel fortunate to live in a place like Montgomery County, which has different values than the ones that are being communicated, and that this is a place, despite our many shortcomings, that this is a place that is committed to kids and committed to the mission of public education, and that's the direction that we're going to take forward. And there may be moments where we have to stand on our principles and we have to stand on our values, and that may mean saying no to the federal government at some points. Just know that as your superintendent, I am fully prepared and will say no when it is appropriate for us to say no when something doesn't align with our values. That being said, we get to have a rich conversation this evening about money and about our school system. The board has been discussing recently things that we can do to improve the facilities in our school community. That is part of our capital improvement plan, and you may hear an awful lot about improvements that we make to our capital improvement budget and how we can make our facilities great. That is not what tonight is about. Tonight is about our operating budget, which is something different, which has to do with our ongoing expenses of how we run the school system on a regular basis. So the focus of our conversation tonight is going to largely be about that operating budget, not necessarily our capital budget. So I do want to share some things that are troubling beyond the federal landscape that have to do with our local landscape and what we are expecting in terms of revenue projections, which is a basis from which that we begin some of our budget conversations, and also kind of taking in stride some other bits of information that are pretty important. We have been instituting a lot of reforms tied to how we've addressed student needs after the pandemic. And we had some federal support and some federal money to help with that, and that well has dried up, and those funds are expiring right now, and that is an issue that we are definitely addressing, is what needs to stay a part of our budget and our operations, and what needs to expire when those funds expire. Similarly, we have a great community of educators and staff that support our kids every day. We are in the midst of negotiating our contract with our unions and our great workforce, and making sure that they that our union decisions and our negotiation decisions are reflective of the value that we place on our educators for the hard work that they do. That is particularly important. We've digging ourselves a little bit of a hole in terms of healthcare benefits. You're going to hear an awful lot about how we make sure that we're providing best-in-class care to our employees so that they can provide best-in-class care to our kids. And this comes at a cost, and it's a very real challenge that we're rubbing up against right now, and I've already mentioned revenue projections. Something else that you'll hear a little bit about, and something that should be top of mind, is trying to think about what does a great school setting look like. And I would posit that when we, focus on our fundamentals and we get down to the basics of what we do, it's really just a couple of things. It's making sure that we have great teachers in the classroom to provide these really remarkable and rich learning experiences. That's the first thing that we do. And I think everybody in this room can think back to a time where you had a teacher who inspired you to do something great. Yeah? It's kind of what's probably motivated you to be here tonight. You became the person that you are today because you had a teacher who inspired you to do great things. That's pretty amazing. Well, unfortunately, our staff does not volunteer for this work at no cost. They deserve to eat and be supported too, and that's a big part of our expenses. It's actually 90% of our budget goes to servicing the personnel needs of our staff. That's salary and benefits. The second thing that we do that's really important is we create really great learning environments. I think it's great that we are a fabulous Blake High School because this is a great learning environment. Great things happen in great learning environments, but buildings like Blake and other schools need to be maintained. HVAC systems need to be kept up. Roofs need to be replaced. Maintenance needs to be done on an ongoing basis to make sure that our schools have great learning environments and that kids can thrive in. So where we are now is there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. The Board of Education gave me some pretty clear direction on some things that they wanted me to focus on when preparing our budget for the upcoming year. They absolutely wanted me to focus on mathematics and literacy, making sure that we're providing for the needs of our emergent multilingual learners, that students with disabilities, making sure that they have the services that they need to be successful, making sure that our schools are safe and secure, making sure that we can recruit and keep the very best workforce in public education in our schools, and taking care of our students for who they are and their whole child needs and their well-being. So I've got a couple of different ways that we can do this. The first way is if you want to go to the QR code, you can give us some feedback on some of these topics and share some of your thoughts. And even if you talk tonight and you share your thoughts, I'd still love for you to send us some information in writing. This helps us to kind of crystallize around some priorities that we're hearing from you, in addition to the priorities that the board has laid out. The other way that we can hear your voice loud and clear is that we have this wonderful microphone right here. And I want to make sure that it's on. Oh, it was on, and then I turned it off, and now it's on again. Okay. Is to just kind of share some of your thoughts. It can be about one of these things, or it can be about something totally different that you're seeing as a high priority and something that we should be focused on in the budget. Or maybe it's a question, and you're like, hey, you know, or do you see a need for X, Y, or Z? Or do you want to focus on this? Or what do you see as a challenge? Whatever your question is, whatever your comment is, whatever you want to share as a priority or a concern, this is really our time to listen and to hear from you. So even if you do or don't want to add something to one of the Google Forms that we have up here through the QR code, this is really a chance for you to share some other thoughts and share your opinions about how we can make MCPS better. Thanks for coming. So I'm going to stop talking. And I'm going to pause, and I'm going to hang out up here, and I'm even going to ask a friend to come and join me. The friend that I'm going to ask to come join me, this is Yvonne Alfonso Windsor, and this lovely lady in the front row, she is our acting chief financial officer. Yep, and she has come up through the system in Montgomery County and is doing a great job as our acting CFO. And she's also expert at helping answer some questions, and we have some other folks from the finance team to help in this space as well. But we're just kind of here to hang out and talk. And good news, it's a really intimate group, and so we can just have a conversation, but now MCPS TV is going to tell me you have to use a microphone. So if you don't mind coming up and grabbing a microphone and just talking and sharing some of your thoughts, we'd love to hear what's on your mind and in your heart. Thanks. Yeah, go for it. Let's talk.
Hello, everyone. I'm Esther Wells. I am the president of the Montgomery County Taxpayers League. And earlier this year, we worked to offer a budget palooza for MCPS's operating budget 2025. And a lot of the community members were grateful for just being able to do a deep dive and kind of just learn what is our budget. So can you talk about maybe what new opportunities or what offerings are you going to have, or partnerships with community organizations to help community members understand and orient themselves with the budget so that they can have thoughtful questions?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Yvonne will chime in. I can tell you that we can't do it alone. There's a great book written by Jamie Vollmer called Schools Can't Do It Alone, and there is a chapter in the book that talks about a business and some of the challenges between business and schools. And there's this great story in there about a guy who makes blueberry ice cream. And he goes to a Chamber of Commerce event, and he talks about how fabulous his blueberry ice cream is and how amazing it is. And then somebody in the front row, an educator, asks, "What do you do when you get a bad batch of blueberries?" And what do you think the businessman said? You toss them. Guess what we don't do in schools? We do not toss our blueberries. We teach every child who comes through the front door with the challenges that they bring, the strengths that they bring, everything that they bring to the table. And we have a very different approach than even some of our community partners. That being said, we know for a fact that we can't do this work by ourselves. And we would love to have an open door to any community group or organization that, one, wants to partner with us and work with us, and two, that wants to learn a little bit more about our budget process. One of the things that we're hoping to do this year, a little bit different than in previous years, and we won't get it perfect this year, but it'll be better than it has been in the past, and it will certainly be better next year, is we want to be able to get to the point where citizens can track down to the penny how we spend our money. And you should be able to see a line in a budget and then be able to follow where that line goes, and not just where the revenue source is, but also what does it mean when you see a big number like $1.2 million assigned to a line in the budget? Like, well, what is that $1.2 million being spent on, and what is the sub-budget that goes underneath it? So we're hoping to have some engagement opportunities where, and even some in a workshop format where that'll be more possible. So Yvonne, anything to add?
No, I one of the things that I do want to add is we are looking for feedback and opportunities to be able to make sure that everyone understands our budget. And we are, looking through our budget. We're hoping to push out soon our budget dashboard where everyone is going to be able to go in, and look at line items in the budget, positions in the budget, and be able to make sure that everyone understands where the money goes.
That dashboard will be a great tool because it's a little visual analytics too. Mm-hmm. So everybody loves a pie chart. I do. But being able to drill down even further, I think, will be really helpful. And something that often gets overlooked as an opportunity is an opportunity to ask follow-up questions. And we want to make sure that folks have that opportunity to say, what does this mean? And how do I get an answer to that? So thanks. It's a great question. Oh, come on. Come on up and say something that's on your mind. Yeah, come on. Yeah.
Good evening. I want to thank you for the words that you shared at the beginning, particularly about Montgomery County's values for our children and for the kind of county we want to live and work and raise our children in. I could not agree more with what you had to say. In addition to being an alum of MCPS schools myself and the parent of 3 children in 3 different MCPS schools, I also serve as senior minister of a congregation, most of whom live and work and have children in MCPS schools. I guess the area that I have most concern about has to do with recruitment and retention of teachers and how that intersects with special education. Yep. I know one of our children, our youngest, goes to the Carl Sandburg Learning Center, and I know that teachers who work in a special education environment are often more vulnerable to physical injury just because of the challenges that the children that they work with have. And I know that there have been teachers who have gotten like concussions and things like that, and the doctors have encouraged them to stay home and rest, but they haven't always been able to find substitutes to cover, because I can imagine a lot of substitute teachers would be way more interested in covering like an English high school class than they would in covering a special education class with children with behaviors. Right. But that creates, I think, not so safe, student to teacher ratios, let alone, touching the subject of academics. But I also imagine it doesn't do a whole lot for like job satisfaction for teachers. So I guess I don't know what the solution is, but I imagine that more money for substitutes, that some sort of incentive for subbing for a special education class. I don't know if those would be helpful, but that's really the area of my concern. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. What a rich comment, and I'll add a couple of pieces to that. In particular, with some of our learning centers and some schools that have some pretty high impact needs, it makes sense to not necessarily have regular substitutes, but rather to have substitutes on the staff who are trained and who are connected to the school by design, and that your reliance on substitutes that are on the daily substitute schedule are in reserve and not something that is a part of your daily reliance or your daily plan. That being said, there's a cost to that, but there's also a cost to a couple other things, and I'm glad you brought this up as a budget priority, because it is something that we're concerned about. And I would draw your comparison to a couple other things too. How we're staffed in elementary schools in general, how we're staffed in special education, and the limited ways in which we've been allocating paraprofessionals is concerning to me. It makes a lot of sense for us to come up with a plan over the next several years about how we might chip away back at class size at the elementary level in particular, and then at special education, and then look at class size as a whole. We're behind, and that's not a position that MCPS likes to tout. And we'd like to think that we're ahead on a lot of things, but the reality is that we're a little bit behind in that space. Our elementary schools, the foundation of the work that we do, needs a lot of support. And when you compare schools that have a 700 student elementary school with a 700 student middle school, the staffing ratios are very, very different. And that's because we've set it up that way. So this is actually a great call for us to look at our staffing standards in general, not just in special education, not just for paraprofessionals and the level of support that we provide. I love the idea of coming up with a little bit of a better approach to how we might do substitutes in general, because the last thing that any of us really wants is for one of our educators to add an extra layer of stress because they've got to be out for something because they have personal lives and stuff happens, and worrying about whether or not their classroom is going to have adequate coverage by a professional. Yeah, of course. Yeah. You have to get the people that are in line ahead of you to
right.
Okay.
To wait my turn.
Yeah.
I mean, the phrase that I just keep coming back to again and again is that our children's learning environment is our teachers' working environment, right? And
Yeah.
so if we can improve our teachers' working environment, it will likely have a huge benefit on our children's learning. I also just, like, as far as the ratios go, I lifted that up specifically for special education because I know of at least one day at Carl Sandburg where if there had been one more teacher not present, they would have reached the threshold that they would have had to close the school for that day.
Yep.
And I know that that is not something that anybody wants.
Not
So
at all.
I just,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. Great comments. Thank you so much.
My name's Ray Custis. I'm actually an alum here at Montgomery County Public Schools too. To piggyback on the substitute issue too, I had my 8-year-old daughter last school year received a concussion from a substitute teacher. Okay, and so not only did she receive it, but they neglected to get her the proper care and tried to hide it. So one of the things I'm noticing that I've noticed for many years living here, and I'm a PRP counselor as well in the county for many of the population who are underserved, is that the responsibility and the accountability in our county has gone straight out of the window. And so it's caused a lot of problems for a lot of the underserved community. And so for me, I'm looking at student well-being as like the main thing as well as special ed because we can't teach if kids are not well mentally and emotionally and physically. So I don't have the solution to it, but I will say that the accountability piece in Montgomery County is something that we need to fix. The insurance provider that we utilize is not competent at all. And so I'm noticing a lot of kids getting harmed because of this, the lack of, the negligence that we're experiencing. So again, I don't have the solution, but I do want to bring it to your attention, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate it. And I got to tell you, nothing erodes trust like having an experience that runs counter to the positive stuff that's going on. And I'm sorry that happened, but thank you for elevating those two issues in particular. It's pretty important. Thanks so much. Yeah, go for it. Come on, you don't even need, just show up. I mean, come on, we're a nice tight group. We should have had food and done an impromptu Thanksgiving here.
Yes,
We're such a tight group already.
So my name is Jeremiah Pope. I actually live here in the eastern part of the county, and a lot of these things on this screen concern me. I know just today, my son, he's an MCPS student at Burnt Mills Elementary. He's actually in the emergent program. And, my wife and I, we visited the school because we had an open house, right? And as we sat back and looked at how the classroom was being engaged, we noticed a couple of things. One, there's a lot of students in the class. The teacher was not able to manage the students properly because of the fact that when you have so many kids, you got one kid over here doing this, the other kid over there doing that. The teacher's trying to do what she needs to do, but the class size is overcapacitated, right? Yeah. And so that was one of my biggest concerns. And then I have a problem with the fact that when it comes to school safety and security, right, is that having an elementary student, we notice in our school the kids fight all the time, and it gets to the point where the children know there's really no discipline behind it. So they'll go punch another kid, don't say anything about it. They go to the principal or whatever administrator they need to go to, then they right back in the classroom. And you have a lot of disruptions, right? And so we have large class sizes, which is inappropriate. Now the teacher is going to get blamed for that. We have a security issue because there's really no discipline because these kids know if I fight each other, I'm coming right back in the classroom. And so that's what I've seen to be a problem, is that I feel like we have put a lot of burden on our teachers, and now they have to become the security guard. They have to clothe and feed these kids. They have to provide all the social services for these kids. And with a budget that's $3.8 billion, I don't understand it. And people continue to talk about, I moved to Montgomery County because we have the best schools in the country, and it used to be true. But we know that's not true today. And so I'm hoping that, you and this budget can do a lot to elevate and work with the teachers who are actually in the school system and provide the teachers with the things that they need so they can be successful, so they're not being, like I said, the security guard and the parent and providing the clothes and the pencils and doing all these things. So I'm hoping that we can do something where the $3.8 billion actually gets down to the classroom.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
And I got to tell you, I really appreciate you re-elevating the class size issue, because I think that there's a danger of the scope of class size continuing to creep. I will make one small editorial correction. It's actually only $3.3 billion. If it was 3.8, good news. It would be amazing, and I appreciate you doing the soft pitch, because Council Member Mink just came in and she was listening and she heard 3.8. She was game. She said yes already. I'm seeing it with her eyes. She said yes, so I'm counting on that as a go. Let's talk just briefly about one thing that's really important. Is it's a big dollar figure. It sounds big, it's bigger than any sum that really anybody can get their head wrapped around. The hard math with your calculator is, how do you divide that amongst 212 schools, and how do you divide that amongst 24,000 full-time employees and an additional 9,000 part-time employees? It actually doesn't go very far. And it seems like a big dollar, because it is in the aggregate, but down to the employee level, it actually really is very limiting. I want to introduce a term that you'll hear a lot from me in talking about the budget and what our educators are experiencing. And it's actually a term that comes from the United Way. And it's ALICE, and it's an acronym. It stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Yet Employed. We may refer to this in the past as the working poor. Asset limited, income constrained, yet employed. That describes every educator and staff member in the school system. Asset limited, income constrained, yet employed. That means that our folks are working very hard for very little, and the outcomes kind of speak for themselves. One of the challenges is, a lot of people ask, well, where does it all go? Where does it all go? Well, I can tell you where it all goes. 90% of our $3.3 billion budget goes to salary and benefits of our staff. And I gotta tell you, we've got a real crisis in making sure that our class sizes don't balloon much further than they already are, because in some places it's really out of control. And that is something that we've got to be, we have to be very mindful of, and making sure that we put in some safeguards to prevent that scope creep from happening. You're absolutely right. Our teachers and educators and the staff that are working in our schools, they have more work than they know what to do with. And the administrative burdens on top of some of the classroom responsibilities that they have are pretty significant. And so there's a couple of things that we need to do in addition to the financial things to make sure that they have enough planning time, that they have enough discretionary time so that they can make decisions about how they support kids in the classroom in a really meaningful way. These things are important. So thank you for elevating that.
Can I just say really quickly that I could really use those additional $500 million?
It's okay. Councilmember Mink was like, I'm good. Yeah. Yeah, of course. You got to hit the microphone, though, so they catch it.
So, the only thing I was going to say is that I think the general public has heard this spiel before. And with that being said, they only look at the billions of dollars and it being so much of the budget. Now, I know if you go from a per pupil standpoint, it's like 13,000.
A little bit more than that, but
maybe
yeah.
14.
Yeah.
19.
It's like 19,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
And so when you're doing it from a per pupil standpoint, that's almost a private school education, right? To a certain degree, right? Mid-private school education.
Yeah.
And so I just want to make sure that, you know, how can we do a better job conveying this information to the public before we turn around and say we need more tax increases?
That's right.
Correct.
Because when you say it this way and say, well, from a monetary standpoint, that it's not really going from one direction to the next, and then you turn around and say, increase my taxes 10%, and then a year later you say, we back broke again to a certain degree. And so I'm just hoping that this conversation that we have with each individual in this class, each individual in this room, that we can actually start talking to regular taxpayers, so then who may or may not have kids in the school system can understand where these dollars are going.
Yeah, and you got to see value.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and-
they need to see some
yeah,
form of value.
absolutely.
Because I think a lot of us is not really seeing the value, and that's why I feel like a lot of us are starting to leave the school system and go other places.
Yeah, and we probably need to do a better job of communicating how we derive that value. And it's tough too for a lot of our educators, because they are planting seeds in a garden that they don't really get to see grow to full completion. And I promise you that when you're having your worst day and you end up in the back of an ambulance and you end up at Suburban Hospital or some other place, you're probably not thinking about the high quality education that the staff and doctors got at MCPS. But you probably should, because they did contribute to making those things a reality so that you could be provided the best care. And as a community and as a neighborhood, we have to find ways to communicate how that value structure works. So that's really good feedback. Thank you so much. You made it.
Yeah.
That was a
Good evening.
tough step.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Tom Eckelmeyer. I have 2 students with MCPS, and I want to discuss some of the key areas, given the fact that my kids were part of the Montgomery Virtual Academy. And the MVA had improved math and literacy performance for all the students. The MVA state assessment scores were actually above the district average. As far as the safety of the students, given that MVA was all entirely virtual and the students were at home, they were inherently safe from anything that they could occur at a hard brick and mortar school. The resources that support the college and career readiness, by providing full-day synchronous education in the standard curriculum, the MVA supported college readiness. And it was a full-day program around other students. It was equitable access to programs across the county. It is the most equitable option for students who need this virtual environment. And as far as student well-being, MVA is a well-being resource for providing the students the learning environment that works best for them. My oldest student is part of the blended learning program. During the day, he doesn't interact with any other students. He only goes to class at night for a couple hours, a couple days a week. That is the only interaction he has with other students. What kind of well-being are we supporting by not allowing children to be part of another program? Whereas with the MVA, he was with students like himself every single day, with breakout groups. They were all working together. They made friendships. They bonded. But now that's been taken away. So if we really support the student well-being and all these other things, don't throw these blueberries away either, because they are blueberries as well. So will the board look at additional funding for the MVA for the next fiscal budget year? And can we support these students that really need this assistance? That's all I have. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Tom, and appreciate your comments and your advocacy. And you know, what a great question for us to consider at a really critical time is, you know, where does virtual learning fit in our portfolio? And when we're at our best, you know, what does equity of access look like across the district? And, you know, how do we provide equity of access to the programs and opportunities that we have? Well, virtual learning could be an opportunity not just for kids who are outside of the brick and mortar setting, but even for kids that are in the brick and mortar setting, and how does that fit in? So I gotta tell you, I think that's top of mind for the board and for a lot of other folks as well, because could present the opportunity to find some efficiencies and also to expand opportunities for kids in other parts of the county to have access to certain courses in different parts, so that's really exciting. I will say that, getting stuck like our board was stuck last year with having to make a lot of tough decisions late in the budget process. I don't envy them. It's a thankless job to be on the Board of Education and to have a lot of information to process in a short timeline. In particular, when you have a budget that you spend a lot of time crafting and proposing, and it goes to council and it gets shortchanged and trying to make some concessions and find the right path after that. Some tough decisions were made, for sure. So I'm stand with the same curiosity as you as to where we can go from here, and also be able to fund some of our other challenges and needs. So thanks for being here, Tom. Other folks, come on down. We were waiting for you. And just as a reminder, come on in. But just as a reminder, if you don't want to talk tonight, that's totally fine. But I do want to hear what your thoughts are. And one of the ways that you can communicate that is through the Google form that's up here. So even if you don't want to say anything and you don't want to be on MCPS TV and immortalized on the internet forever, we're very interested in your comments. And I will say this, as we compile all this information, you may be saying, like, what on earth are they doing with all this stuff? We'll be taking the feedback that we get from the Google Forms as well and putting that out there on the interwebs. So thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening. My name is Andrea McDonald, and I stand here in rich disappointment, and I've echoed this to you so many times. To be the parent who moved to Montgomery County, everything else aside, specifically for your school district, I had my pick from any county in the state of Maryland. And in looking at your website, in speaking to your administrators for special education, I was given glowing reviews and all of what MCPS can do for all of my children. Not one, not two, but all three of my children. When my daughter was born, she can fit in the palm of my hand. She was given a less than 10% chance to live through the first night of life. She is now 12 years old. Per her evaluations, she's gifted and talented, twice exceptional. I was told never to expect her to have vision, the ability to speak, not to amount to anything. My sons had similar. They're now about to be 9 years old. There is a vast disparity between the parents who have children in special education versus those who have children in general education. Yep. Night and day is a gross understatement. Mm-hmm. Yet the theme of the soundtrack for the parents who are in special education is the same. And it echoes greater for Black and brown students. Mm-hmm. When people see my children on paper, it doesn't matter if they identify are two or more races. It just matters that they're in special education, and that's what they're coded for. I appreciate you being a breath of fresh air to say that we don't throw away our blueberries. From where we're sitting, our blueberries have been thrown away, casted aside, put in the lowest of the low. As a parent of children in special education, for one child, I sat in an IEP meeting for more than 4 hours, trying to convince the people on the other side of me why my child is worthy of all of what this says she's worthy of. I still have to go back for 2 other meetings to have the same discussion. This is a year after year after year, and that is one child. And then when you look at who are the powers it's the same people. And when I sit there and I am the minority and everybody who's making decisions are of the majority, I feel defeated before I get started. I don't know how it translates for those who sit and make decisions about students that they will never interact with, and for those people who sit there and do the evaluations, and then when the teachers look at these students, they're wondering, were they awake when they were evaluating them, or is this someone being intentionally obtuse to what the child actually needs? Because their related services is not adding up to what was recommended versus what the child actually needs. So when we're saying that we're intending on bridging gaps, that has to be something that is done equitably and with fidelity, because otherwise we're going to continue to chase our tails. For my children, I have been spun in so many directions, and I would like to think that I am a person who advocates for my children. I do so with respect. I am never belligerent. I am never the person that's going to be gaslighted into disrespecting anyone. I would prefer to remove myself from the space because I was brought up differently. I will not sit there and allow anyone to cause me to disrespect my upbringing. So when I go there and I come in peace, and every time you're met with adversarialism, you start wondering, what's the point of these meetings when we talk about budget and providing funding, but the trickle down never actually make it to where it impacts the students in a positive way? How does that work?
Right.
Where's the equity in that? And something resonated with me that you said, the state of affairs when it comes to equity with students in Montgomery County is the same when you were a student, now that you are the superintendent. Had I known that before I came here, I would have gone elsewhere. That is beyond sobering to hear the superintendent have to say that. And if that's your experience, imagine the experiences of the children who are defenseless in this and are innocent in this. When people put their egos before the community, the children that they are supposed to serve, we will continue to live in disparity. My children are amongst a vast population of students in this school district who day after day remain to be underserved, intentionally underserved, because at some point we have to recognize that this cannot be accidental. We have to own up to that. And as I believe someone said before me, we appreciate you, Dr. Taylor, taking accountability, but the people beneath you, their attitudes are not indicative of that leadership in you. So I get it. You speak for everyone, but those people also need to take accountability for their actions, because you are not in the classroom on a day-to-day basis. You are not there. When the teachers need support, it should have started in that IEP meeting with the evaluation that matched the students with the services that they need, not based on the color of their skin, their zip code, and their educational status of their parents to be able to challenge you on what it is that you've written about their child. It should not be that. If we're saying equity, we need to lift that. If you're saying it's going to be done with fidelity, walk in that. Don't pay lip service to things, because one thing I need for everyone to understand, what they put on paper and in practice, they change the trajectory of children's lives irreparably. And if you're saying MCPS is going to attribute to how the person at the emergency department in the hospital takes care of things, also recognize that MCPS is also painting the narrative of where the prison system leads by failing the children that they are charged with educating, Black and brown students. Look at the data that suggests what they receive for education and where their outcomes lead them. By third grade, if they don't achieve that literacy, they're going left. Not right, they're going directly left. So we need to go back and get those blueberries that we keep tossing out and make amends and try extending the classroom into the home, where the parents feel as though they can now be partners in it, as opposed to, oh, she didn't make this parent meeting. Well, why didn't the parent make the parent meeting?
Yeah.
So rather than sitting there and having a gossip at the administrative level about the parent, try to bring them in. Whatever the resources are, try to bridge that home-school divide, and we can see wonders happen within the MCPS community. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Great job. So much rich content there. First things first, thanks for sticking with us when we really haven't earned it. And you're absolutely right. We have to own our successes and also own the things that we don't do well and when we don't have success. And it's very troubling when we see our performance that roughly half of our kids are not meeting expectations with what they need to do for literacy and mathematics. It's incredibly troubling. I will say this, I'm an optimist. And I'm an optimist who has not seen a lot of systemic change in the last 30 years since I left MCPS to where we are today. But there are inroads and there are positive steps moving in the right direction. I have no doubt about that. All of our challenges and all of our issues are fixable, every single one of them. And I will say that when the educators that are working with our kids are in the front seat and they have an active role in decision-making and they're guiding things work out better than not. When there are other influences, when central office gets involved sometimes, we don't necessarily make the best decisions that support kids, and that's something that we need to look at. I would say that to the extent that we are addressing special education and students with disabilities, we need to reimagine how we serve students with disabilities. Top to bottom, in the entire district, that needs to be a huge priority. Looking at how our students are receiving services, what those related services are, how we structure the day, how we structure the classrooms, what the class ratios are. And one of the ways that I know that we can deliver the best equity in the county is not with training, but with a spreadsheet. And so you'll hear me refer to that a lot in terms of how we allocate staff, how we allocate resources, how we allocate support, and yes, how we allocate training too. Those things are going to make a significant difference. I will say that your faith that you do have in MCPS is not misplaced because we can fix these things. It is going to take all of us in the community to work together to do it. None of this will be easy and none of this will be overnight. But thank you for calling us out on this and keeping us honest in this space because we owe it to our kids, all of our blueberries, to make sure that they unleash their potential and that they are truly successful in life. Thank you so much. Come on up. You're next. Let's talk sustainability.
It's really hard to follow.
Yeah.
But I love the analogy of the blueberries, so I'll try to stick with that and be brief. And I'll share with all of you because we all eat. My interest here today is because I see food in the school system as something that ties all of the topics that are part of the key areas. And sorry, it's my first time studying the budget, but I kind of took a look while we were hearing to everyone else, and I found that for the school food service, there is $73 million that come in.
Mm-hmm.
But when I go to the schools and I volunteer with the MCPS Green Schools Committee, I find that there is more than 100 pounds of that food being wasted in every school. So if I crunch the numbers a little bit, that's at least $30 million that are going to the trash. Mm-hmm. So we're receiving it, but we're throwing it to the trash. And then all of these kids that are from our diverse community, our family included, sometimes, they're appalled by this. And we have some solutions, right? Like the shared table, and we're trying, but we could do more.
Yeah.
I feel like if we need to make magic with the numbers, this is a great area of opportunity. And I'll just try to point a couple more things that need to be included on that magic to happen. So we're also paying for the trash to be picked up. Mm-hmm. So we're not only throwing those $35 million, but it'll be really good for the financial committee, and if there is a way to help to find how much of that is already part of the food waste, because at least 25% of the overall of whatever you're paying for the trash, it's food. And so if it could be picked up by the farmers, it will not have to be paid as trash. So baby steps, right?
Right.
Sure.
And then the other thing that I want to mention about that is that we also, in the calculations I made, that's more than 6 million pounds, so that's more than 30,000 tons of food a year. And then finally, the school district, I didn't see it in the budget, but we also pay for mulching, for compost, and if we did it with that same food, we could reduce a lot of money that will also reduce the pesticides that we need to put on the ground. So we could tie it all up. Personally, I don't know why there are so many people that help in the kitchen that are no longer there. I'm not in the knowledge to judge, but I think that that's an opportunity where we could support our community with the challenges that come ahead. So thank you so much for listening to this. I feel like no matter what our kids' challenges and brights are, we're all gonna continue eating. And it's very important in our society that we don't embrace the culture of waste in the cafeteria, because that's part of what they learn every day. Thank you.
Wow, what a
Thank
great
you.
thought. And just to touch on the food nutrition budget a little bit, because this is a great opportunity to share some thoughts on this too. Our nutrition budget is self-contained, so it receives money from the federal lunch program, which is part of the FDA's program to serve schools in our lunch program. Every single meal is subsidized for service. Some are subsidized completely at 100%, but every single meal has some kind of federal subsidy tied to it. It is run like a business in one sense, that revenues and expenditures equal out at the end of the year. They even utilize some of their resources to do capital improvements to make the kitchens a little stronger and a little bit better. But one of the things I really like that you said that is really important is it really ties to like what kind of example do we want to set for our kids. Mm-hmm. And if we want to set the example of being good stewards of our resources and good stewards of our food, we are going to reduce waste. And that's a good example that we can set for kids, and it's something, let me put it this way. Our kids are learning lessons from us every day. They're learning lessons from the things that we teach in the classroom, but they're also learning lessons from how we behave and how we interact with one another on a regular basis. One of the ways that we can teach a positive lesson is to set the example of reducing waste. It's a positive thing. Yeah, sure. You do have to ask the people that are in line ahead of you, though. Okay, just checking.
So, not to dismerit some great things that are happening, right?
Yeah.
So, in a couple schools, there is a group of kids on compostology. 40 of these 210 schools are trying to do compost some way or another. So I hope that those efforts continue, and that if that is something that we could find funding from other ways.
Yeah.
But super quick, there is the entrepreneurial section that I'd love to learn more about. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of income in other school districts generated by the kids that sell the finished compost. And there is also entrepreneurial opportunities in the outdoor activities for the high schools, for example, to be part of the process on site. So I dream of more circularity for the food as part of the classroom mechanisms, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great comments. Great comments. So we've been going kind of strong for an hour. Yeah, come on up. We've been waiting for you. And I'm digging all the red, white, and blue for Veterans Day today. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we've got some assistance with some interpreters, so thank you.
¿Puedo decirlo en inglés? Quiero practicar un poco.
Oh. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about that since the federal government is off today, so I was asking myself, why? I thought the Montgomery County Public School was going to be off today also.
My wife asked the same question. So real quick, we have a need for a certain number of instructional days, and we can choose, and we have some choice in which holidays we pick and which ones we don't. And for this year's calendar, this was one of the days that we picked to be a school day in favor of taking off another day.
Could you change that for the next year?
Yes, that's possible.
Oh, okay. So the other concern I had was that I work as a bus attendant at the Randolph Depot, and I noticed that we have a trouble student, and then he behaves really bad, but then he gets worse when we drop him off at the house. And as soon as he sees the mother or the father, he changes his attitude. Like, and I say, why does he do that? But, and then the student, when he saw the mother coming to take him from the bus, and then he started hitting me and spitting on me. I said, but why does he act like this? And then the mother told me, oh, forgive him, he doesn't understand. But he's I think he's 10 years old. And then she was saying, oh, because he's autistic, he doesn't understand. But then the boy, in my mind, I was saying, I think he understands, because how did he learn to spit on people, hit people, and then he was sticking the middle finger? Just like he learned that, he could learn to behave when the mother was there, right? Something like that. So I said, I think this lady shouldn't say that. Oh, forgive him. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't understand. No, I think he does. Yeah. And what I thought was, could it be possible to include a training or a session for parents to come to the school, or the teachers to go to the houses and
what a great
try
recommendation.
To observe.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that, and then when I got the email about this, I said, I'll go and ask and talk about it.
Well, thanks for giving up time with your family to talk about this, because what a great recommendation to provide some guidance to parents. In fact, I'd say that in general, this is maybe an area that we fall short on, is that we don't really have an arm of the organization that focuses on family and community engagement and providing things like training opportunities and educating about a whole host of things that are going on with our kids, not just how we can help support them a little bit better. And I got to tell you, some kids require a lot more patience than others sometimes, don't they?
Yeah. And especially if those parents stay home, and I don't know what they're doing, they stay home doing, I don't know what, but it would be nice if they could go during those hours. They could go to the school or some other places.
It would help. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm so nervous. But
Oh, no, you did so great. Oh, thank you. Yeah, you did so great. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks for coming. Hey.
Hi. I saw you last week, but I'm here as a parent, but also as a social worker. A lot of what I'm hearing sounds I can't not say as a clinical social worker that social workers can't rethink special ed.
Right.
I can't say that they can't train staff to know what is going on with that student. And I, as somebody who has looked to get a job in MCPS at one point in my life, not seen social work listed. I'm not quite sure. I don't want to make assumptions about why that is, but I do think that there's a lot to be said about that. And a lot of the things that I hear tonight and at Board of Ed meetings and at different events is just this need for communication and being able to meet people where they're at. My other role is the Kennedy Cluster Rep, and I can't not say this as I don't understand why the earpieces for live translation can't be at every single school. Asking for that this year and only having, I think our director said, oh, we got some, thanks for bringing this to our attention. But you have to share it with all the schools in the cluster. And I just don't think that that's very fair or equitable or anything for not just the staff, but like the PTAs, the teachers, the parents who want to have a communication with somebody. It is I'm just aching to communicate. And I can learn Spanish. It's my goal this year, but I can't do that quick enough before my kids graduate. So I just, like, these little things to make us connect are the things that, when I didn't go to MCPS, but I knew a lot of people who did, and that's what they did really well. They connected everybody together. And I just want that piece of communication to be part of the operating budget for all the schools. Right. We all need to be able to communicate with each other in live, because if we were doing this, you know, everybody take a break, let's have the Spanish translation come, we'd be here until 10 o'clock. Right. And that's just not reasonable for anybody. So that's my big thing. Go social work.
I agree, and I'm like a 9 o'clock bedtime kind of guy, so that definitely is unreasonable. You know, I think you bring up a couple of really interesting points, and the piece about social work and making sure that our kids have what they need to develop as their social self is really important. I will say that something that does worry me a little bit is how we are definitely starting to drift away from our core focus, and it is hard because we kind of have become like all things to all people, and we're not particularly doing any of that really well. And that's been a pain point for us, and trying to figure out where our lane is so that we can service kids best is a challenge, and trying to figure out what community resources we should marshal to support kids is a challenge. I don't think that hungry kids perform well in school. I don't think that tired kids perform well in school. I don't think that angry kids perform well in school. I don't think that kids that are experiencing a lot of stress at home perform well in school. And so how do we mitigate some of those things and provide an adequate level of support while also trying to be mindful of our core mission of teaching and learning? It's a delicate balance for sure. In terms of communication, without a doubt, what a huge opportunity for MCPS as a district to excel in being the district that communicates clearly with its families and its community members in a language that they can hear the words that we're trying to share. That does have a cost to it. I would love to even cost out what that looks like to see what we were working with, but what a great recommendation and what a great starting point to create equity throughout the district. I see that as definitely an avenue that we should be ever committed to, is how do we communicate better, and what can we do each year to kind of ratchet up the expectations of communicating clearly and communicating in a way that people can understand and hear what we have to say. To that end, the last little piece that I will say is that I think we're missing some two-way communication opportunities for folks to be able to communicate with the school district in a meaningful way, so that we know what's going on with you, better than an email when you're, reached a 10 out of 10 in frustration, and you've gone through all the layers of bureaucracy in MCPS, and you've just reached your frustration point, and you finally break down and you have to email everybody in the world to get an answer on something. We gotta find a better way to do that. So, thank you so much. Fantastic.
Hello, Ted McAllister. I'm an elementary instrumental teacher over in the Gaithersburg area primarily. I spoke a bit at your unconference. I don't know if you remember, but yeah. And, you know, like, hearing like a lot of these conversations on like the students that are unintentionally being like blueberries tossed out, it happens whether we want it to or not, you know, and it's a problem, it's a real problem. There's also a lot of the smaller things like in our budget that I look at, and I've spoken at board meetings and stuff before, where it's like we need to be uplifting these like smaller line items and not like forgetting, not having them be the first things to cut. As a music teacher, I'm going to advocate for music programs, of course. And I think that that's one of those things that really lines up with student well-being, as well as just generally like helping make MCPS a school system to brag about. It's something that, as you've admitted now, that there's things that we shouldn't be bragging about, that we can't brag about, things we've fallen. In general, I'm going to say that I feel like we could just always use more staff in our buildings, you know. One of my elementary schools I teach at, we have 2 homerooms in the 4th grade class. And when you have 3 kids that need to be separated on a homeroom basis, well, we were going to have 3 homerooms before last year's budget, and now we have 2, and there's some kids that should be separated that aren't. You know, like there's opportunities like that that just lead to safety issues, that lead to learning and academic issues when the whole class is impacted by behavior. And more people in our buildings, more staff members, it's obviously the biggest line item. It's hard to ask for the cost of it, but it's so worth it. But not just in terms of what our homeroom teachers, especially at the elementary level, but even in terms of like these smaller programs, things like specialists, for example. We're routinely kind of given the minimum amount of staffing. Same school a few years ago when Tubman opened up in Gaithersburg, our specialist allocation initially went from a 1.5, having one person there the whole time, someone there 2.5 days of the week, to a 0.9. And we had a lot of staff members leave the school only as like projections changed to swell back up to a full time, and then we had to hire a new teacher here and there. And it wreaked havoc on a school that, Title I schools aren't really known for their retention of having consistent staff. And it's just something that we shot ourselves in the foot in regards to that. Especially with our specialists, so often we have schools that drop to a 0.9, now they have to find a 0.1 somewhere else, cobble it together. And in terms of like the people we have in our buildings, we need to help be building those communities, those teachers that know kids knowing more teachers that they can go to that will understand them beyond like just their homeroom class as well, like more adults to interact with. Like there's a higher chance of them finding someone they can trust. And we need to stop like doing the minimum possible when it comes to stuff like specialists. Yeah. Even in terms of instrumental music, it gives me the opportunity to see a lot of schools, because I've been at 7 schools in the 9 years I've been in the county, and some people more than that in less time. We're spread thin, we're just one of many job descriptions that's spread thin. There's not, in instrumental music in particular, we're not really tied to any sort of formula. It's like, we can give you a 0.2 when we're expecting like 200 more kids to play an instrument. It's we're also seeing like that ballooning class sizes in that itself, and it leads to people being in 3, 4, 5 buildings at a time. The other thing also, like specifically as far as budget line items, I wanted to bring up was last year there was an accelerator that was included that eventually got cut in terms of instrument repair for low-income schools or needy populations. And I think it's definitely worth re-examining providing that equipment that students can have access to, because it is our Title I schools, it is our focus schools where there might be $1.80 or something for students that doesn't buy a lot and doesn't go a long ways when it comes to like instrumental music repairs and stuff. And as a specific line item that I really hope you consider keeping on the budget, or at least adding to, is having like money. The instrumental music team in MCPS recently, I think, conducted a vast inventory overhaul of knowing what all was there. And we know that there's a lot of need. There's data. There's no need to examine data using a flashlight, as our old superintendent would say. 2 ago, of course. But we need to use the data we have, and we need to really make sure that we're actually acting on it, not just studying it again after we've shown and demonstrated multiple times. This is what we're told. These are things that help. Class sizes help when we lower them. Yeah. Having money for instrument repairs. We all like, as a teacher, it can be tiring to be asked like, well, have you seen this happen? Yes, we have. I think that's all I have for now.
All right. Well, impossible to forget you, Tim, and I'm glad. Ted. Sorry, dude. You made the connection to the unconference. I appreciate that for sure. And if you hadn't brought up instrumental music, the instrument part, I would have too. To know what he's talking about on a couple of different things, there's some things I want to highlight. The first one is the cost of an actual instrument replacement. And if you Google what it costs to replace a tuba, you would definitely see that a $3.3 billion budget is not enough to do what we need to do to make music a part of our kids' experience. A couple other things that were really troubling that you said. And I think you moved really quickly over this, which says, at one of the elementary schools that I teach at, implying that he teaches at multiple elementary schools. Being itinerant staff with that kind of role is really, really demanding and really tough. Thank you for sticking with it and giving a lot of great service to the kids, because that is really tough to be itinerant and going from school to school to school with different sets of expectations, different groups of kids, when the reality is that we could do probably a much better job of aligning expectations if he was in one school and providing that level of service. So, yeah, go for it. You too also have to ask permission from all the other people that are in line. I'm kidding. Go for it.
All right.
Yeah.
You know, and it's some staff members see that like moving from school to school kind of helps you keep a breath of fresh air. You know, I'm at 3 schools, one of which I split with another colleague of mine. And on one hand, I could see it as 3 very short weeks. On the other hand, you know, it's like everyone, I don't mean to pick favorites, but to some extent, like there's some environments at some schools that are better than others. That's a reality of it. You know, we have a group chat with a bunch of the elementary instrumental teachers, and there's some things where you hear about, oh, that principal's asking you to do that, and I'm not going to go into that here, of course. But there is, you know, there's a lot of inconsistency with what schools have what. I think like even our threshold for what schools receive like Title I benefits is different than the federal one. It's like 40% federally, I want to say, but we're more like 80% for farms. And but I guess to speak on that, like it's being at so many schools, again, we see the opportunity to kind of see like where things are working, where things aren't. But and we also see some opportunities to be like, oh, I made it through Monday and Tuesday, now I'm not at that school anymore. I hate like feeling that way about some buildings, and I felt that way in some years where this climate's toxic. You know, I'm glad to be at somewhere else for the rest of the week. And we really, and you know, by reducing the amount of itinerant staff we have, by having people more in one building, we have the opportunity to kind of influence that school more, to kind of grow to be a part of that community and be a sense of belonging. You know, at my Title I school, I've been there for 9 years, and I've been able to be there because of how it's been allocated, because of how like number of kids. You know, there's a whole formula for it for instrumental music, of course. But it's very fulfilling to be there for a long time, because there's kids who I've taught their older siblings now at this point. My first batch of 5th graders that I taught graduated high school last year, and I'm still seeing some younger siblings, and it's, you know, and they see like that as something to look forward to in school. I feel like I'm helping be more of a part of the community there because I've had that presence. And when we split teachers across so many different schools, when we try and do the minimum sort of amount of staff thing to make it work, we lose that in a lot of our buildings, especially the ones where we have underserved populations. Our Title I schools, our focus schools, are at the most risk of that.
Yep. So another thing that he was talking about is he was talking about a 0.1 or a 0.9. What he's talking about is a percentage of a full-time employee and how that's allocated across different schools. And I got to tell you, some of the things that we do and some of the decision-making kind of defies logic about how you would assign a full-time equivalent to a school versus a part-time equivalent to a school. And there are some adjustments that we could make that just would better align with practical application. So thank you for elevating those. Those are definitely big budget items for sure, but definitely great that they got elevated. So I'm going to take one more comment. Come on up. And then we're going to do some closing wrap-up stuff, and I'll thank you for spending the evening with us tonight.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Julia. I'm a new substitute teacher, short-term. I've been in MCPS for 2 months, and seeing with the election outcomes and will we see less need for substitute teachers in the next cycle? Because we're seeing
No.
a new budget, and therefore, no, I mean, I know, like, we're temporary workers,
Yeah.
right? So, I'm not sure, and I didn't have the time to see the budget, but will we see a decrease in the need of substitutes?
So that's a great question,
Yeah.
and good news, there's tremendous job security for substitute teachers, and if you have a spare day in your calendar and you want to commit it, Fridays and Mondays in particular, we could really use your help. But we will always need substitutes, and we will definitely need substitutes in the future, and it needs to be a part of how we
Regardless
plan,
of, I don't
regardless
quite
of
understand the
anything.
budget and the cuts or whatever.
That's quite all right. And
Interesting.
good news, we haven't put anything out yet. We're at the part in our budget process where we're hearing from you about things that are important, and multiple people tonight have mentioned how important substitute teachers are, and so that's an issue that's been elevated tonight.
If I can just add, I
Please.
think MCPS will benefit from having an online PDO video where newcomers, I did international finance, I have a master's degree, but it was so hard at the beginning to understand the hours, the people. You're just thrown in this world, like you're like thrown into this book, and you feel that your need to survive and pay your bills makes you overcome all that. But it would be nice to see, when I work at the World Bank, you could sit on a computer and just see this video, or where I work for the census, and you're like, this is gonna happen, and this is gonna happen. And so you may have a better retention if people know what is the future. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that actually elevates another issue that is a concern of mine, kind of in the back of my mind kind of constantly, is just how we provide information and training at all. And making sure that our training is really meeting the needs of people who are receiving the information, whether that's educators or whether that's community, or even some of our kids.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
I want to thank you for giving up your evening at the dinner hour to spend some time with us. And even if you didn't talk tonight, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of your thoughts via that Google link, that would be great. We're also just an email away. We also have a few more of these engagements coming up where we'll have a chance to talk via Facebook Live in Spanish. And I think our next one
Is that one, I think?
is the 21st at Clarksburg High School.
And then with Yvonne on November 18th on Facebook Live in Spanish.
Yeah, very good. I'll be proposing a budget to the Board of Education for their consideration at the end of December, December 18th. And there'll be a little bit of public fanfare that kind of goes with that process. And the board will be processing that information. They'll have work sessions, and they'll be evaluating my spending request throughout the month of January and into February, and then making a decision about what budget they want to send to County Council. So I just want to thank you for being a part of this process, and even if you didn't share your thoughts today, there's lots of opportunities to do that, and know that we take it all very seriously, and the things that you've said tonight definitely resonate with me, and they definitely resonate with our team and the lived experience of our educators and staff members. And they appreciate your support, as do I, because you're making a difference in the lives of our kids as they are, and your support makes all the difference. So thank you so much, and have a lovely evening, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.